My wife landed a job at a major retail corporation's headquarters and quickly climbed the corporate ladder. Meanwhile, I pursued my dream of being my own boss and started a business. However, when I was around 27, my business took a hit due to the economic downturn, and I found myself needing to rejoin the workforce. My wife, ever the supportive partner, used her connections to help me find a job, especially since we were expecting our second child and needed the additional income. I ended up working at the same company as my wife, albeit in a different department. At that point, my wife was earning more than me since she had a head start in the company, and I was just getting my feet wet in the corporate world. I remember one time while having a beer with a male colleague, he casually mentioned that he'd heard some chatter from folks in my wife's department. Apparently, she was quite chummy with the senior execs and had a reputation for being flirtatious at work, even suggesting she was being passed around. This comment infuriated me and almost led to a brawl. I dismissed it as drunken gossip, convinced it was just petty jealousy over her rapid rise in the company. I trusted my wife implicitly, believing I knew her better than anyone else. I was too trusting, too naive. After my wife returned from maternity leave, I quit the job to focus on my business again and took on the role of a stay-at-home dad. Our relationship had its fair share of highs and lows, just like any other couples, but there was never any red flag or any hint that she might be cheating, let alone something worse. Fast forward 7 years, she's still at the same company, but now she's a director. We have 3 kids, and I work from home as a full-time dad. I only work part-time, but my business was doing well enough that our incomes were almost equal. I thought we had it all figured out. We were financially comfortable enough to take more frequent vacations, but my wife had other ideas. She was away 2 nights a week for work. I urged her to spend more time with her family, arguing that we didn't need the extra money enough for her to be away so often. We had 3 young kids who needed their mom around, but she insisted that her job demanded it and that she had given up too much to just walk away from the opportunity. We had this conversation several times, and her go-to excuse was always that she was up for a promotion next year that wouldn't involve any travel. She's been spinning that yarn for the past 3 years. Her defense was that she's always accessible to our kids because they can call her anytime. Our eldest is only 8 and doesn't even own a cell phone, but that's the kind of logic she uses to evade her responsibilities as a mother to our kids. I would drop the subject since our discussions were going in circles. I embraced my role as a full-time stay-at-home dad and an equal financial contributor. Her part of the deal was to come home 4 days a week and try to buy her way out of parenting by showering the kids with toys. It didn't really get to me because I genuinely enjoy spending time with my 3 kids, picking them up from school, and being involved in their lives. I just wished my wife would realize the importance of spending quality time with the kids and stop trying to weasel her way out of everything. Our bed life was average, maybe once or twice a week. It's been like that since we had our first child. It was never an issue for me because I understood that we both led busy lives. However, everything changed one day when I bumped into a former colleague who still works with my wife. We got to chatting, the usual small talk. I mentioned to him how hectic my wife's work schedule is and how she's always traveling. He works in the same department as my wife, so he knows her routine inside and out. His reaction when I mentioned my wife's frequent travels gave me the impression that something was off. I knew I couldn't probe him further because it would be awkward given that we weren't that close. So, I made a mental note to look into the matter more deeply when I got home. My suspicions grew stronger, and I had a feeling that my wife was hiding something. She always dressed well for work, so that wasn't a giveaway. Her wardrobe hadn't changed, and we still shared the same connection we had when we first started dating. The only difference was her frequent travels. Since I had become a stay-at-home dad, I decided to investigate further by installing a GPS tracker on her car. I noticed that she would spend the night at various hotels within a 30-mile radius of her workplace on the days she was supposed to be traveling. I decided to show up at one of these hotels one day to find out what was really happening. I hired a babysitter and stayed in the parking lot until the following morning when she emerged from the hotel with my former boss, who was her work colleague at the time. That pretty much answered most of my questions. They weren't even trying to hide it. I was beyond shocked. I rushed out of my car to confront them. They exited the hotel as casually as if they were leaving a business meeting. I immediately jumped out of my car and confronted her. My former boss tried to distance himself, but I told him to stay put. However, while I was confronting my wife, my former boss managed to slip away. All my wife could say was that they were having a business meeting, acting as if I hadn't just caught her emerging from a cheap hotel with a married man at 6 a.m., about 30 miles away from our home. She tried to pretend as if I was blind, and I told her that our marriage was over. It then hit me that I should have known this all along, that the rumors one of my former coworkers had spread about 7 years ago were true. I told her I had to go home and that she should stay with her affair partner. She ended up staying with a friend and wouldn't stop calling or texting me, begging to come home and see the kids, whom she had been leaving with me while she cheated. About a week after discovering her affair, I wanted to get the full story because rumors were circulating that she had been having affairs with multiple men at her workplace. We met up, and I told her that I might consider taking her back if she came clean. I had no intention of doing so, but I wanted closure. Despite my efforts, she was unwilling to discuss the matter, so I took it upon myself to do some digging. This was when I discovered with absolute certainty that she was in the midst of her 7th affair during our 9-year marriage, with 6 of the men being people she worked with daily. One of these affairs was a long-term one with my former boss. I was floored and utterly devastated. I proceeded to file for divorce and got through that painful process. We separated a few weeks later. Her pleas and begging were to no avail. After having affairs with people she worked with on a daily basis, some of whom I knew, all of them either married or in serious relationships, she made me look like a complete fool. No amount of apologies will make me reconcile with her. Months after our split, I still receive pleading text messages from her, but I'm absolutely done with her. The most devastating part of this saga was that a DNA test revealed my middle child isn't biologically mine. It shattered my heart, and I haven't fully recovered. When I confronted her with the test results, she denied it. We both went for a second test, which confirmed the initial results. She wanted me to keep her secret, but I refused. I sent a letter to the wives of all the men she cheated with, informing them that I needed a DNA test for my son. Unsurprisingly, most of their relationships are now on shaky ground. The news spread so quickly that she ended up quitting her job and deactivating her social media accounts. So far, none of the men have come forward, which I didn't expect. He's still my son, after all, but I've kept a record of the men's names in case he grows up and wants to know who his biological father is. I'm currently in a relationship with a woman, an old classmate of mine, and I'm being extremely cautious this time around. But she doesn't show any signs of infidelity. Things are going pretty well, and I'm genuinely happy. I won full custody of my 3 children, and I try my best to avoid my ex-wife. It's gratifying to know that she's miserable, working a lower-paying job in a different field, and everyone who knew us knows how she ruined our marriage. I'm still in the process of recovery, taking things one day at a time. I've become a person I never expected to be, but I'm genuinely enjoying my life. Second story. I've never sought professional help, but every girl I've been with has thought I might be a sociopath. It's something that makes me question myself. I had been trying to persuade my girlfriend at the time to go on a trip she wouldn't be interested in, so I spent months doing things to make her more open to the idea. One morning, I decided to surprise her by going to her apartment with flowers. It was around 6:30 a.m., and my plan was to make her breakfast while she was still asleep. Since I didn't have a key, I manipulated the lock to let myself in. When I entered her bedroom to place the flowers, I saw her asleep with another guy in her bed. I went to the kitchen and sat down, needing a moment to gather my thoughts. I had to determine how much time I had and find out who the guy was. Quietly, I sneaked around her bedroom, found the guy's pants, and took his wallet. I noticed they both smelled strongly of alcohol. I knew she wouldn't wake up until at least 8 a.m., and I wasn't sure about the guy, but based on their alcohol smell, I estimated I had a few hours. I went outside to retrieve my laptop from my truck, then I returned to the apartment and sat down at the kitchen table. I used the guy's ID, which I had taken, to gather information about him. I found his Facebook profile, learned his parents' names, sister's name, and so on. I obtained their contact information and ran a background check on him, discovering he had a few possession charges. I also copied down all his credit card details. I went to some sketchy parts of the deep web and purchased his social security number. I already had all this information on my now ex. I cooked breakfast for both of them. While their pancakes were cooking, I went into the bedroom. They were only covered by a thin sheet, luckily it wasn't tangled. I pulled the sheet off, revealing them both naked, and took some very unflattering photos. Afterwards, I returned to the kitchen, plated their breakfast, and sat at the table to gather my thoughts. I then went outside and placed my laptop in my truck. I brought their breakfast back into the bedroom and placed it on the nightstand. Then I went back to the kitchen, grabbed a doorstop from the front door, and quietly brought a chair into the bedroom. I closed and locked the bedroom door, placing the doorstop at the base of the door under a dirty shirt. I set the alarm clock to go off in 3 minutes and sat down in the corner of the room, waiting. When the alarm went off, my ex woke up, turned it off, and noticed the breakfast. She smiled and looked at him, realizing he was still fast asleep. She seemed confused and sat up slightly. Then she noticed me and exclaimed, "Oh duck." I told her to sit there and be quiet if she wanted things to go smoothly. She knew me well enough to comply, nodding with a terrible expression on her face. I said, "You're going to get out of bed, walk to the other side, bend over and wake him up, kiss him, and tell him there's someone you want to introduce him to. Tell him it's very important that he doesn't get loud or get out of bed." She responded with frustration, but I interrupted her and said, "Be quiet and follow my instructions, or I'll put an end to this right now." She complied. I instructed her to get back into bed, and he turned towards me, still under the influence and very confused. He asked, "Who are you? What the heck are you doing here?" I replied, "Just sit there quietly, and everything will be okay." My ex urged him, saying, "Just do what he says, you have to listen." I then told them, "I made breakfast for you. Eat it." Both of them were scared and uneasy. My ex picked up the plate and stared at it, while the guy refused, saying, "I'm not eating that." Despite his resistance, my ex insisted, "Just eat it, we have to." Reluctantly, they began eating, but each bite seemed agonizing for them. They believed I had poisoned the food and that they were going to die. In their minds, they were certain that consuming it would be fatal. Finally, I said, "Okay, that's enough. You can stop now." They simply placed the plates back on the bed. I told them, "Here are 2 options. I have enough information about both of you to make everyone you know turn against you, to leave you without a home, and even to make you contemplate ending your lives because the lives I can create for you would be unbearable. That's option 1. However, there is another way. I'm a reasonable person, and all I ask is to never see either of you again. You'll move to New Mexico together, and I will let go of everything." They exchanged glances but remained silent. I grabbed their pants, which were in front of me, and threw their cell phones back to them. I said, "Call your employers right now and inform them that you're quitting. You first, put it on speakerphone. Let your boss know that you're relocating and apologize for the short notice." She made the call, and then he did the same. I said, Great, that's sorted. Jenny, contact your landlord next. Let them know that you'll give up your security deposit and will move out within 2 weeks. She made the call as instructed. I then informed them that they had a week to find an apartment together in New Mexico. I mentioned that I would cover the security deposits for their new place. However, I made it clear that if they didn't follow my instructions exactly, something terrible might happen to them. I painted a gruesome picture of a scenario where a family member discovers them hanging by belts in the closet with embarrassing items inside them. It would be a truly mortifying way to meet their demise. After that, I left them alone. They eventually moved to New Mexico. Over the next few years, I kept an eye on them through several fake Facebook accounts. At some point, she became pregnant while they were still living together. Around 3 months into her pregnancy, she quit her job, while he apparently found a good job for himself. On a trip to New Mexico, I placed 9 ounces of powder in individually wrapped baggies, along with a scale and a stack of cash, which was quite costly, inside a duffel bag and placed it in his truck. Then, I anonymously called both the police and Border Patrol, claiming to be a concerned citizen who witnessed his vehicle picking up something suspicious at the border. I returned home and a few days later, I saw on Facebook that he had been arrested on bogus charges. It turns out, due to his prior criminal history and the evidence of intent to distribute, he received a sentence of around 20 years. As for her, she ended up seeking refuge in a women's shelter. When she gave birth, she made the difficult decision to put her daughter up for adoption. Since then, I haven't been able to keep track of her whereabouts. She seems to have disappeared completely, and I strongly suspect that she is homeless. Third story. My wife and I have been through some tough times during the 10 years we were together before getting married, and that's what made me choose her as my partner and propose in 2020. We had an incredible year in 2022, a fantastic wedding, an amazing honeymoon where we reconnected, and I had put a lot of effort into our relationship, which was paying off. We were both successful at work, getting promotions, and we were excited about starting a family, although we hadn't been successful yet in planning to buy a house by the end of 2022. We were on top of the world, but it turns out we had different reasons for feeling that way. In 2019, we became really close friends with another couple whom we had known casually for a few years before that. The guy was my wife's coworker, and we became very close to them and their kids. Things changed when his wife unexpectedly got pregnant during the COVID pandemic. My wife and him became extremely close, texting each other all the time and being more affectionate than I was comfortable with, although our community is generally touchy-feely, so that aspect bothered me the least. They started hanging out alone, and I noticed my wife being overly concerned about his well-being when we were on trips together, and so on. As far as I knew, my wife had never cheated before, and we had always been clear about our commitment to monogamy throughout our 13-year relationship. I trusted her completely, and things were going really well between us. I caught them about to have an intimate moment at a party after everyone else had gone to sleep. It was late in the night, and we were all sober. My wife insisted we stay over at their house, so she left our spare room bed and planned to meet him downstairs. His wife and infant were upstairs. As soon as I discovered them, I kicked my wife out and immediately cut off communication with her for 72 hours because I was afraid of what I might do in my anger. The affair partner ended up telling his betrayed spouse before I could, and she reacted in a similar way. Later that week, I learned from the other betrayed spouse that this affair had been going on for 1.5 years, even before we got married. There were multiple instances of them hooking up, apparently, no intimacy, but I suspect they're not telling the whole truth, and it became clear that it was more than just a mistake between friends. To make matters worse, the affair partner is one of my closest friends, and he apparently justified the affair to his wife by claiming that I had given him implied consent since I mentioned I was happy about my wife having a close friendship with him. It's absolutely insane. I'm completely devastated. It has been a couple of weeks now, and I've gone through all the emotions that many of you have experienced. I kicked my wife out, and I've been dealing with weeks of drinking, crying, breaking things, and going to therapy. I'm incredibly grateful for the amazing support from my friends. For what it's worth, my wife does seem genuinely remorseful. She has taken full responsibility for the damage and harm caused. She hasn't tried to manipulate or deceive me, and she has been honest with our friends. She hates herself for what she has done, but the fact that this affair went on for so long without her admitting it, and that I had to experience the trauma of catching them, makes me question the sincerity of her remorse. After a lot of deep introspection and struggling to come to a decision, I've decided to ask for a separation from my wife and tell her that she needs to move out for the foreseeable future. I don't see a way for us to overcome this situation. It's been difficult for me to accept that this has nothing to do with me or our relationship. She has her own personal issues to deal with, and I can't be there for her during this time. Maybe in the future, something positive can emerge from this, but for now, our relationship is completely shattered. I no longer see her as my partner, which is crazy considering we were planning to have kids just 3 weeks ago. It's been a couple of weeks, and things have taken a turn for the worse. My wayward wife had been staying with friends or family for the past 6 weeks. In January, during our last conversation, I had made it clear that she needed to move out, but I had offered to store her stuff in a spare room. She packed it up but left it there. We've only had a few text exchanges since then, strictly about logistical matters, and we've kept it polite. About a month ago, I sent an email requesting to plan the logistics of our separation, financial accounts, pets, furniture, deciding who gets the house, and so on. I expressed my desire for an amicable process and just wanted to move forward, heal, and process things on my own. 3 weeks ago, my wayward wife responded to my email and bombarded me with expressions of love. I took a couple of days to think about it, but then she texted me saying she was coming home with the expectation that our disagreement was over and we would at least live together while figuring things out. She couldn't understand why we couldn't just be roommates. I firmly told her absolutely not and made it clear about my boundaries. I booked a therapy session with a mediator, which has turned out to be a blessing in disguise. My wayward wife expressed a desire to reconcile, claiming that our relationship is stronger than the affair. She argued that she has been unfairly displaced and made homeless despite staying with friends and family while earning twice as much as I do. I made it clear to her that I want a divorce and that our relationship is beyond repair, and the mediator supported my decision. From a logistical standpoint, I can't afford the house we're currently renting anyway, so I offered it to her. I told her I'm actively searching for a new place and will move out in April. Until then, I'm staying at a friend's house because I can't handle the intense anxiety of being in our home anymore. I believe I found a great place to move into, and we're taking turns caring for the pets and managing our belongings. When I informed her that I let our landlord know I'm leaving and needed a rental reference, she freaked out, accusing me of trying to get her evicted, which is ridiculous since she can easily afford the place. She called me last week in a panic, claiming I'm abandoning her during her time of crisis and doing all of this just to punish her. In my therapy session this week, she expressed anger and frustration over me throwing away items in the house while she was gone. What she fails to understand is that I discarded gifts from her affair partner and the betrayed spouse, as well as a baby planning book that now brings me immense sadness. We were trying to have kids before all of this happened. It's unbelievable. Emotionally, we may have made some progress, but I continuously reiterate my boundaries. It has been helpful to have a third party like the therapist point out her delusional thinking and hold her accountable. However, she's clearly in a hysterical state, and I need her cooperation to establish a financial plan and smoothly navigate our separation with grace and dignity, just as I had requested weeks ago. But damn, she's completely lost it. It's all about her, no empathy left for what she put me through. In her mind, everything that happened after the affair came to light is disconnected from any consequences. She sees it as a series of injustices done to her. These therapy sessions help give structure to our discussions, which is crucial for my emotional well-being at the moment. But it's clear that she interprets everything as if it's all directed at her, just despite her. I'll be moving out in 2 weeks, and oh boy, I can't wait to get out of here. I'm trying to be patient in hopes of achieving a better and less expensive financial outcome, but I'm worried she's going to lose it completely when I sign another lease. On the bright side, this whole situation has finally killed any lingering hope I had for reconciliation before going through with the divorce. Here are some key points. While negotiating the financial agreement, she tried to make me pay for her egg freezing and future adoption fees, along with reimbursing her parents for their wedding gift. She accused me of making her homeless and abandoning her during a time when she needed support for her mental health. Without my knowledge, she secretly drained our joint bank account, despite our agreement not to touch it until after the divorce. She revealed this during a planned therapy mediation session and dismissively said that money wouldn't help me heal. Our therapist later called me and labeled her as a narcissist, advising me to distance myself as quickly as possible. Somehow, she discovered my new address despite my efforts to keep it private and showed up at my house. She refused to return my pet to me as part of dividing our assets. She demanded my prescription medications and wanted me to provide her with pills she uses due to her obsession. After blocking her, she started using spoofed phone numbers to call and harass me. She called me a coward for leaving her and ending our future together, and she still portrays herself as someone in need of help due to her mental health crisis. Yeah, no wonder my therapist diagnosed me with PTSD after putting everything into words like that. A few weeks ago, I blocked my ex on all platforms, and my community has completely cut her off. However, she still emails me regularly, trying to convince me to go back to therapy, probably to salvage her reputation and friendships. She sends blog posts about how infidelity isn't a big deal and gives minor updates about our pet. Unfortunately, she refuses to give me full custody of the pet, even though it's actually mine, as a way to maintain contact through shared responsibilities like pickups and drop-offs. It's been heartbreaking to face the dilemma of feeling guilty versus prioritizing my own well-being by avoiding any contact with my ex at all costs. Now let's talk about me. I moved out 2.5 months ago. Some days and weeks go by when I feel content with my new life, and I find ways to distract myself from the loneliness. I try to reframe it as a sense of peace and freedom. However, there are still moments when it becomes overwhelming, and I feel depressed and in pain. I experience a sense of emptiness, numbness, and question the purpose of my life, although I have a fantastic therapist, a supportive group of friends, engaging hobbies, and a healthy self-care routine. There are limits to how much they can alleviate the pain. The other betrayed spouse and I are really close. We were good friends long before this. She's incredible and serves as a shining example of strength that I admire. She has become a beacon of light in my life in more ways than one. However, there are still many challenging days. She has also filed for divorce. Our first wedding anniversary, we were together for more than 12 years, was a couple of weeks ago, and it brought back intense memories of the pain and devastation I felt when I first discovered the affair. I've been feeling angry, depressed, and overwhelmed by the unfairness of losing the life and partnership that I'd worked so hard to build and was proud of. It hurts to know that she chose to marry me even though she knew I didn't consent to her actions. I'm grieving for what I've lost. I recognize that I have a lot to offer, and my life still holds potential. I can be perfectly fine on my own, but that was never the path I chose. On many days, I still struggle with pain and heartache. I make an effort to work out vigorously. I've lost some weight. I spend time outdoors, see my friends often, and prioritize getting better sleep. I've also sought help through medication to manage my anxiety. It's progress, but I can't say that I'm completely killing it. Unfortunately, I'm still dealing with the effects of the situation. Filing for divorce this week and working on a financial agreement didn't bring me much satisfaction. There was a small sense of accomplishment, but it was overshadowed by the worry that she might react in an extreme and unpredictable way. I'm still not functioning at 75% of my capacity at work, and it's starting to take a toll on me, especially because I work in a demanding field. Despite having a boss who understands my situation, I try to focus on the present moment and not think too far ahead. There are times when I compartmentalize the pain, allowing myself to temporarily set aside my own trauma and look beyond it. However, I'll be honest, I'm not sure if I'm moving forward now out of habit, momentum, or a genuine desire for my life and career. Emotionally, I feel drained, as if a shadow is creeping into my vision and dampening the enthusiasm I used to have for life before all this happened. It's clear to me that this person is a narcissist, professionals have confirmed it, and I have no desire to reconcile with her. I can't say that I'm completely indifferent yet, it's more of an intense feeling of repulsion. Hopefully, one day I'll reach a point of true indifference. I've been mourning the loss of something intangible in our partnership. It's like a pillar or a keystone has been removed, and I struggled to put a name to it, but I can sense its absence. Perhaps it was the belief or faith in myself and my path that came from someone I deeply loved. It goes beyond simply being alone. I'm still exploring the impact of these emotional scars. I read success stories from others, and while I know I'm fortunate in many aspects of my life, I wish I could be where they are today. There are many who have it even tougher than me. I hope that I can have self-compassion for not being there yet, although it can be challenging at times. I try to see it as a season of experience that will eventually come to an end. To those of you going through similar challenges, I wish you the best of luck. Recovery is a long, messy, and winding road.